Sangaitis and Great Spirit, ancestors, our Chartres community, 17 years old, comes to you. Today we reflect. In ancient times, Druidic priests and priestesses enter the cave on the hill. Deep in the womb of the earth, remembering the source of life, a spring bubbles forth. Looking into the pool of water, a druid makes an offering, a prayer touches the water. Rippling through time, today we enter the waters of that prayer, of that dream, through another kind of fire, a virtual fire, hearkening back to that first thought, that first fire, that drop of water. We stand before the cathedral, entering through one set and a second of large wooden doors. We make a turn and face a labyrinth inscribed in memory and in stone from those early days. The swirls of the spirals and the loops, an echo of that ancient prayer. We're there today now, each other, hand in hand with each other. We put our hearts and minds together, coming out of a time of darkness into the time of darkness of the cathedral, remembering, renewing, refreshing. Amen. All my relations.
Thank you, Apila. Thank you, Ruth. You know, I must say, everyone, welcome. That every time we have our community calls month by month for 17 years now, when Ruth sings and Apila gives her invocation, my heart and soul are immediately taken back to the sacred site of Chartres. It's become an indelible part of my psyche, I think. Our annual journeys to Chartres. We're in preparation, as you all know, for our pilgrimage there. We missed 2020 and 2021, but we're heading back to that sacred place. I'll be saying a little bit more about that in a minute or two, and we'll be introducing our program. But let us pause, as we always do, for Lynn Bell, who will provide some astrological impressions of our time. We're in a very turbulent time, Lynn, as we all know. So tell us what's happening in the sky.
Right. Well, I mean, some of you heard a long workshop I gave for Ubiquity, but right now we're heading into this Jupiter-Neptune conjunction, which often has to do with a new vision that comes in, a new vision in spirit about what we're all feeling, I think, and what's been most striking since I last spoke here with this community is how everything has shifted. It's this feeling as though all our expectations have been overwhelmed, underwater, wiped out. The land is no longer solid. And it's been fascinating to watch how quickly our minds have moved, how quickly our understanding and our focus has changed. The next few days, there have been these many connections with Venus and Mars. And Venus and Mars are the gods of love and war. And one of the possibilities was the love of war, which is, of course, what we have. But we also have, I'm receiving messages every day from people saying, Ukrainian refugees are arriving in Paris. Can anyone house them? The many are accepting donations. There's also this incredible outpouring, this sense of wanting to be there as we watch something yet again. It's not like we haven't watched it on other places in the planet, but as we watch something that suddenly feels everything we've imagined about how we come together is changing. Tomorrow, the sky is very tough. The moon opposes Mars. And going into the 22nd of March, if the war is still going on, which it certainly looks like it will be, Mars squares Uranus, which is a very, very powerful, just break it all, don't leave anything standing. And there don't seem to be a lot of options for compromise just yet. And I'm trying to, like the rest of us, I think we're all praying, we're all holding the space for healing, and we're all trying to see where that could happen, where this huge change in the boundaries of our world could lead us. I think it also changes our attention on degrees of what's good and bad, what's red and blue, what's maybe not black and white, but in a way we're being asked to choose. This is the nodes of the moon in Taurus. We're being asked to choose right now what really matters to us, what our deepest value is, what holds us together, what brings us together in love, in friendship, in community, in recognition, for all living beings. And this is the conjunction of Venus, Mars, and Aquarius, this power that we have to see ourselves with so many living beings on the planet. That's where my hope lies right now.
Thank you, Lynn. Sounds like we have a tough couple of weeks coming up. So let us all attune ourselves to Venus as much as we can. These planetary alignments matter. And we need to be conscious about our orientation. So thank you so much for that. I'd like to now begin our program. We're going to have Jackie Lewis, a senior minister of the Middle Collegiate Church in New York, speak in a moment. But I wanted to just set a little bit of a context for where we are. It's now March, the second Sunday of March. We began in January and then announcing that we were in fact going to go to Chartres this year. We were uncertain all of last fall. We were inspired by Apila's dream team that went. It looks as if the pandemic is receding, at least in most places, although it has been There's been surges like in Germany and in China. So we're not out of the woods there yet. Now we've had the invasion of the Ukraine, but we're making a commitment, everyone, sort of come what may, unless we're turned back at the gates, to make pilgrimage. And one of the themes that we have been developing over the last several months is that at the heart of pilgrimage is the willingness to overcome obstacles, to go to a sacred site, that if we can arrive there with a pureness of heart, we will be deepened in our hearts and souls, will be transformed, and will be empowered to leave that place more clear about who we are and what we need to do as we all work together to shape the future. The theme of this year is, in fact, Venus rising. The third of the liberal arts, rhetorica, is under the aegis of the goddess and the planet Venus. And so we're very much wanting to attune ourselves to the energy and archetypal profundity of Venus. And we'll be having someone in a month or two talk to us about Venus, Aphrodite in the Greek mythological tradition. And we want to now, as we come out of the pandemic, and even as we experience the scourge of war, contemplate how do we regenerate love at this time of duress. And the pathway that we are going to be embracing is the pathway of apology, which Eve Ensler, V, spoke about last month, reconciliation and reparation, which Jackie Lewis is going to speak about today, and healing, which is what we're going to be going into next month in April. And so over the next 6 months, as we prepare ourselves for a meeting there between the 13th and the 19th of August, at a time where they celebrate the Feast of the Assumption, when they bring out the Black Madonna, who's been sequestered for the past year, for 1 week in the cathedral. We're going to be preparing ourselves for a deeper immersion into apology, into reconciliation and reparation, and into healing as a way to regenerate the energies and intelligence and compelling force of love. So that's our pathway, everyone, as we prepare for our journey there, which I hope all of you will take. I'll put the link to our syllabus in the chat box in a moment. But I also want to, before we dive in with Jackie, I want to bring Apila back, because Apila is developing something very wonderful, an exhibition there, and has a request of all of you. So Apila, why don't you come back and take a few minutes to tell people what you're doing and what you need.
Thanks, Jim. And good morning again, everyone. In 2023, we've applied for, with the help of Mary Lou, who orchestrates almost every kind of arrangement with our community there, Mary Lou Bell. She's been with us from the very beginning. She's helping us to organize an exhibition in 2023. And at that exhibition, down the hill from where we're at, it's an old basilica, huge art gallery space. We'll be filling it with Muslim printed, the sheer fabric, the muslin fabric. We've imprinted it with all of the dream collages from over the years, and we'll be featuring those banners. And also we want to offer to the community a book, a prayer book of invocations from Chartres, and another book of Jim's morning talks. And to do that, we need your help. And how we need the help is this way. If any of you have been to Chartres in the past, or have friends that have been, please look into your closets, your shelves, whatever, because we need recordings of those prayers from on-site events and Jim's talks. And if you find something, you can contact me, Apela, A-P-E-L-A, at wisn.org. And let's see, let me put it in the chat here, okay? We almost have enough for the prayer book as is from the monthly calls of Chartres, which were recorded, but unfortunately, we only have 1 year that was produced in the first 7-year cycle. And Jim, that was Rhetorica. So, Jeannie just sent me her copy of it. So I'll be happy to share it with you to get ready for this year if you would like. All right, but we have 1 year and then we have the calls. So if you have recordings, please let me know. And Rick, I don't know if everyone can see, it says me, host and panelists, but I want everyone to be able to see the address.
I'll make sure that they get that.
Okay. All right. Thank you. And have a good call this morning.
Thank you, Apela. It's a wonderful thing after 17 years that we're now having an exhibition there in Chartres. Our relationship with the cathedral is deepened year by year. Our strength as a community continues to flourish no matter what's happening in the rest of the world. And I just want to thank you, Apela, for everything that you've done, your leadership over the years. Apela has been there at creation along with Lynn, along with Andrew Harvey and others. And they have been the kind of the stalwarts that have made Chartres year by year such a deep and rich experience. And as you all know, every year we have what we call main faculty, people who have come in just for that year. When we were last there in Astronomica, those of you who were there, we had Rick Chartres, the great astrologer and philosopher, talk to his book, Cosmos and Psyche. Lynn was there, and we had a 7-day initiatory process into the grandeur of the astrological reality within which we live our lives. And this year we have Eve Ensler and Jackie Lewis, who are going to be the main faculty each morning, as you all know. And so V spoke last month. And so this month we want to have Jackie Lewis speak to her about her book called Fierce Love. We're in a time of fierce love. I'm in the process of reading the book, and it is a very compelling discourse, really, on what love means in a contemporary world that is so fraught with contradictions and the impersonalization and commodification of our world through social media and everything that we're experiencing. Sometimes it's hard to reconnect with the simple essence of our own humble humanity. And Jackie Lewis does that in her book. And when we discover it, we realize that love is a fierce thing because it unites everything into something of beauty. So Jackie, really want to thank you for joining our faculty this year with Eve Ensler. And we really look forward over the next couple of months for you to be guiding us in this pathway of apology, reconciliation, and healing. And I now turn the program over to you with a warm, warm welcome. Jackie's going to be speaking to her book for about 20, 25 minutes, then we'll have a little dialogue, and then we'll close out. Welcome.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you, everyone. I'm so thrilled to be new to this beautiful community. Eve Ensler and I have known each other for many years now, and her invitation to join you in Chartres this summer feels like a gift from the universe. gift of love from the universe. So let me just give you 1 minute on why I'm here with this book, and then I want to dive in and just kind of give you an overview of what I'm thinking about. I've been saying that this is a hot mess time, and then I find myself as I say it thinking, well, what exactly is the time period of this? I'm a 62-year-old woman who's lived through quite a time of, I don't know, upheaval and awakening and foment. All of us have these last decades. I'm born in 1959, so it's the 60s. It's Kennedy's assassination, and then Dr. King's, and then Roberts. It's the women's rights movement. It's the civil rights movement, or the Southern Freedom Movement. It's the LGBTQIA movement. It's the Vietnam War and the anti-war movement, and the shadow of World War II and the Holocaust, in the shadow of burgeoning democracies, right, all around the globe, and the resistance to new ways to be free and liberated. And I was an almost 9-year-old kid when Dr. King got killed, and I felt really called, traumatized, yes, by his assassination, and traumatized by all the images you and I saw in those times of people marching across the bridge, being violated, dogs, hoses, excuse me. All of these scenes traumatized us, but also catalyzed us. And I think in the end, we know, you and I know, the only thing that's stronger than hate is love. The only thing that's stronger than darkness is light. The only thing that's stronger than fear is moral courage. So I write this book as a clergy who is a universalist, who believes in all the paths to God that lead to love, believe in all the names of God, my favorite one being love. And I realized, as I was navigating these last 10 years, since Trayvon Martin was killed and all the sort of upheaval around racial violence in America, we need something more. We need something more than church. We need something more than organized religion, if you will, to sort of get us through these times. And I think it's love. So this is the book. And I'm joined by people like Valerie Kaur, and I'm joined by Rabbi Michael Lerner, and Angel Kyoto Williams, and Marianne Williamson, and you, talking about love as a public ethic. Van Jones, even talking about love as a public ethic. So I'm not sure, Rick, are you saying you can show my piece or no?
Yeah, I can show the slides, Jackie.
Okay,
The slideshow mode's not working, so everything's fine. You'll just see a little bit around the frame.
Okay, that's fantastic. So Rick's going to help me just give you an overview of the book, the grounding themes in the book, Fierce Love, and you can start anytime, Rick, are two. One is that almost all the world's
What? Okay, yeah.
all the world's major religions have at the core teachings about love neighbor as self. Buddhism, Zoroastrianism, Jainism, Christianity, Judaism, Islam, Sikhism, all have expressions about love your neighbor as yourself. This is a ubiquitous human calling. The Quran says, don't withhold from anyone that which you need for yourself. The Hebrew Bible, the scriptures say you shall love the stranger because you were once strangers, and you should love your neighbor as yourself. Rabbi Jesus teaches that in Christianity, do unto others as you'd have them do unto you. In the Sikh tradition, it says, try not to break anyone's heart. Can you imagine a world guided by not breaking anyone's heart? So that's one theme in the book. And the other is this theme of Ubuntu, which is a Zulu philosophy, ancient kind of philosophy that says, Umuntu ngabuntu ngabantu, a human is a human through other humans. We are inextricably connected. We are each other's one organism. We feel each other's pain. We are responsible for each other's thriving and surviving. So a bold path to ferocious courage. and rule-breaking kindness that can heal the world. This is fierce love for me. Rick's going to take us to the first piece of the book, where I'm writing a book about 9, you can keep it rolling, Rick, 9 practices. The first 3 about the self, and the second 3 about your posse, your people, and the third 3 about loving the world. So this is a writing guide that we made, and we can go now to chapter 1. I really decided, friends, to extrovert this thing we intuit, which is we really can't love the world if we don't love ourselves. We really can't love each other if we don't love ourselves. That we are actually, well, maybe the bottle, but after that, we're the first love object. And so how is it that much of our conversation about healing and wellness and love doesn't start with the self? I've been asked about this as I write, like, do you really think that that's important? I think it totally is. That this beautiful definition of love as a non-possessive delight in the unique particularity of the other. This Dr. James Loder. The non-possessive delight in the unique particularity of the other. And I've been really wrestling theoretically and practically with, can we have a non-possessive delight or an unconditional regard for our full self, for all of the parts of us that are selves? Many of you are conversant in sort of internal family systems. I mean, my little Jackie, my broken Jackie, my Jackie that got sexually molested as a child, the Jackie who failed at college in one major, the Jackie who is sensitive and can be damaged in a world that doesn't do women and Black people well. All of those Jackies need my unconditional regard, my non-possessive delight. The strangest part of me needs to be loved like a stranger. And so I spent 3 chapters talking about self-love. How do you love yourself unconditionally? In my tradition as a Christian, we would say God created each of us. And this is a Hebrew scripture understanding as well. So God creates me like God, a little like God, in the image of God. And I've been saying in my teaching, if we believe there's a holy other, a loving other who's created us, can we not honor that creator, that creating energy, that love that made us by fully loving ourselves, by fully loving ourselves? So I'm wanting to talk about a spiritual practice of loving ourselves unconditionally, with grace, with patience, appreciating our physiology, our physiognomy, my body, my face, my brain, my disabilities, my sexuality, my journey, all of it as a tool with which, a loving tool with which I can embrace the world. If we're going to talk about making apology together when we get to Chartres, and then we're going to talk about reparation and reconciliation, I think the first step is self-love that helps us to reconcile. This is the body, the vehicle, the tool with which I've been given to engage the world, and I need to love it. Written in Toni Morrison's book, Love It Hard, love it fiercely, love it for exactly what it is. So I'm inviting you to be on that journey with me too, to be particular and intentional about loving yourself. Rick, as we think about what that might look like, let's take us to the second spiritual practice, and which is to know yourself fully, to be honest with yourself. So this practice is to speak truthfully, because it will set you free. These practices are not linear, but I do think there's a building upon it. The idea of loving myself includes being honest with myself as a spiritual discipline so that I can curate honesty in the world. Now, we know we are taught as humans to be polite and careful. And in fact, Donald Winnicott would say, all of us have a little false self, meaning you're driving on the road and someone cuts you off and that you don't jump out in your full id and beat them down. That's the right amount. That's the appropriate amount of carefulness, of politeness. But you and I know also the world is on fire with lies. Lies precede truth. Lies which feel like truth unless you get caught. Lying is a kind of international pastime, a way to cope with a stressful, anxious, sometimes dangerous world. And I'm just reminding myself and all who engage this book that actually truth is the only thing that liberates us. The truth actually does set us free. It's frightening at times. It requires courage, always. It can be spoken, the truth, in love, with tenderness. But untruth traps us in a quagmire. It stunts our emotional, spiritual growth. So the truth that will set us free. And in this writing guide, I'm inviting us to, what's the hard truth? What's the thing that stuns us? What's the most difficult truth of all to own, to take in, to hold on to embrace? It was Marianne Williamson that said, "How dare we not own our beauty?" For some of us, it's difficult to be honest about how gifted we are, cherished we are, dynamic we are, powerful we are, good we are. For some of us, it's difficult to own the things that make us feel ashamed or embarrassed, the things that make us wish we could start our lives over. And I'm just saying the truth of all of that as a practice directed toward ourselves helps us to direct that kind of a practice toward others. And that kind of truth is fierce. It's the only kind of love that can heal us. There is no reconciliation without truth. There are no reparations without truth. So when we're together in Chartres this summer, we'll be speaking more about truth and reconciliation, truth and reparations. Rick will take us to the third practice now, as I struggle with my allergies. And this idea, again, in the first section of the practices is about you, about me, about myself. And I'm saying another spiritual practice is to begin to travel lightly, to let go of the burdens we carry, to downsize the burdens. Playfully, I say, maybe we have a trunk full of burdens, of things that we have collected in our life. Coping mechanisms, behaviors, unforgiven wounds that are heavy, and we're dragging them around with us. And maybe our life journey is to get them from a trunk to a suitcase, to a carry-on, to a fanny pack, to just really lift up our stories, knowing that our stories have powerful meaning and information for us, that we are a product of the stories. The things that we learned about us, the things told to us about us, the way the world stories us. Those stories make our identity, and those stories are fraught and painful and full of injury, but they're also full of resilience and tenaciousness and capacities that we've developed just by being human on the planet. If we can lift up the stories and look at the stories, look under the stories, examine the stories, exegete, I might even say, or exposit our stories for the wisdom that's there. Maybe like we would, read the sky for the wisdom that's there, to read the stories for the wisdom that's there, and to let go of the stuff that doesn't work anymore, to let go and be lighter in the world. My own story is full of gorgeous parenting and gentle love and support and encouragement, but also a God image that ultimately didn't see me as a woman. I was given a God to love who cared more about my sexuality or my my sexual behavior than anything else. I was given a God to love that didn't love all the people, only some of the people. So I had to let that go. You hear what I mean? I had to let those parts of my story go to get to write the new story, to write the story that really allows me to flourish and thrive and survive. And I think this is the spiritual work that we do, to let our burdens go, to own, to love ourselves unconditionally, to own all of the things about us, and to then downsize the burdens we carry, is the first 3 spiritual practices about loving ourselves. Rick, let's take it to the second group of practices about loving our posse. And this is, I want to tell a story here. Call this practice showing kindness and affection wildly to make fierce love real. I think many of us have had an experience where someone was just outside the lines, kind and loving to us. For me, it was as a 22-year-old traveling across Canada on the way to a wedding with my sweetie. And we were driving with the sunroof off, and the sun was beautiful and the sky was clear. There was no traffic. There was nothing to cause us to have an accident, except we did. The car in which we were driving seems to have lost all the air in the front left tire, sped across a 5-lane highway, turned 360 degrees several times, and then ultimately bounced on the sunroof. Sunroof to tires 3 times. That we walked away from that accident as a miracle. But we were 22 years old, we had no money, we had no resources, and I was all alone in Canada, in Windsor, in a hospital, with my boyfriend wounded, and me with no money, no car, nothing to speak of to survive. And a Canadian woman approached me in the hospital and drove me to get food, checked me into a hotel, paid the bill, came to get me the next morning, took me to rent a car, drove me back to the hospital to pick up my love. That's rule-breaking kindness. That's crazy, wild love. She crossed the borders to me, white lady to African-American girl with big afro, strangers, both of us. She broke the rules. She crossed the borders. She was wild in her affection, crazy in her affection. This kind of love toward our people, toward our neighbors, the closest neighbor of all, maybe, our partners, our spouses, our kids, those kids that came back home from college and moved back in. That kind of love to the stranger on the subway, the one in the street reading the phone, and they step into traffic and you grab them back by your elbow. You know what I mean? The kind of stranger you find yourself next to in a disaster like Katrina or Maria, and you are all bailing water and you are all keeping each other's houses safe. And you don't care what the religion is, or the sexuality is, or the race is. This human being is in solidarity with this other human being because that's how we survive. This is the 4th practice, to find the ways to show up as the Christian scriptures say, a good Samaritan, or in my case, a good Canadian, who will go all the way outside of a comfort zone to love you, to make you well, understanding that our wellness, our thriving, our surviving are interconnected. And I can't be, Dr. King says, who I fully am until you are who you fully are. Which then takes us to the 5th practice. And it is, I think, just as important as the wild love, the out of the bounds love, is the ability to confront as an act of love, to confront, or I might say carefront, the obstacles to justice, to well-being. Dr. King says, justice is love correcting everything that stands against justice. That's love lived out loud. So that confrontation might be having a difficult conversation with your parent, like I did with my dad several times, but in one really difficult moment, really sort of drawing a line in the sand and saying, Dad, I love you, I respect you, but if we can't fix this dynamic, I'm going to have to stop coming around. That kind of confrontation that tells our loved one who's an addict, we're gonna work on this together, but this doesn't work, or expects to be respected in the workplace, or demands equal pay for women who are paid 18% less than men on average for the same work, or who demands voting rights, or the cessation of banned books. That kind of interpersonal confrontation in our relationships with our family, with our friends, with our beloved, with our colleagues, with our coworkers, with our neighbors, ends up also growing the spiritual muscle to confront an unjust world and to make the world that we all dream of, in which everyone has enough. So again, a spiritual discipline of confrontation with dignity and I statements and not nonviolent communication. We'll be working on that in Chartres this summer. How do we confront with love so we can transform our circumstances with moral courage is the 5th discipline. And the 6th one, Rick, is thinking inclusively. So that wild Canadian who loved me didn't think of me as a stranger. She thought of me as her people. And so this 6th practice is to really live into this Ubuntu place that says, I am because you are. And so all these people are our people, to increase our tribe, to begin to imagine that we are kin with everyone. Indigenous folks, African-American folks, Asian folks, Latinx folks, white folks of every nationality, right? Because white isn't a nationality. All of us are human together. And if we have belief systems that have entrenched us in our tribalism, how can we expand our imagination? How can we lay down the belief systems about who's in and who's out, and what's strong and what's weak, and what's acceptable, and be more elastic and more nimble, so that we think of all of the people as interrelated to us. And as we shift our minds about that and increase our tribe, it takes us to the policy table to make a better world for that trans kid. It means we'll never say don't say gay, because we'll love all of the people, no matter who they love. It means that we have to stand up for voting rights, because we understand that redistricting and clamping down voting rights makes the world not a good world for Black and brown people. So thinking inclusively, there are people too, as a spiritual practice we'll be talking about this summer. The 7th practice, and we're almost finished, friends, the 7th practice is about living justly. So we're in the section now, self, people around you, lovers, world, to live justly every day. It isn't just the activists, right, guys? It's how we spend our money. It's how we create a budget. Not only is the national budget a moral document, your personal financial budget is a moral document. It indicates what your values are. How do we have an everyday practice, like we floss our teeth, to think about the media we consume, to think about where we shop, to think about what we say to our children when we're watching media, to think about where we buy our books and how, to think about where we can energize justice and planet wellness and anti-racist, pro-women behaviors. What's the world we want, and how do we practice every day this simple question: what would love have me do? This was the gospel according to Emma Lewis, my mother. What would love have me do today as a spiritual practice? The 8th practice that's in this book that I'm trying to live my life by is joy, to find joy daily, that it is the water of life. I've been in ministry for 30-something years now, And there is enough to be angry about. There's enough to be sad about. There's enough to raise our fists about and to declare, a spiritual war, if you will, on. But I do not believe that we will get to the world we want without also sourcing joy. Rumi says, when you do something from your soul, it's a river, it's a joy. So how do we curate joy as we live our lives of love, as we make apology, think about repair, think about reconciliation, and think about healing? Joy, I think, is the balm in Gilead. It's the neosporin, if you will, on the cut. It's the peroxide on the wound. The joy is, the delicious taste of a grape, or perhaps the dancing that we'll do together this summer. Or I got a book from a woman named Cole Arthur Riley, and in the book, she sent incense that is in my office. Every time I walk in, I think of her beautiful words and her beautiful liturgy. These roses here, my babies surrounding me, all of the things that give me joy send me back into the world for activism. And it also heals my soul. It makes me able to repair me. So let's curate joy, because it is the water of life. And finally, at least for this book, I've been really working also on the spiritual practice of believing in love. I grew up as a Christian kid with Christian parents, and I'm very, very committed to the teachings of Rabbi Jesus. But I realize that my religion is love, that God is love, that love is my God, and that this practice of love, ferocious, fierce, expansive, nimble love, is the only thing that is going to heal what's broken in our world. I think there's lots of paths to it. I think there's lots of vocabulary about it, and I don't feel like I have the only language to use about it. But I think love is the way, to crib on the Christians. Love is the way and the truth and the life. Love is the path that will make us community. Love is the way that we will be able to really be sorry, to make apology, to make amends. Love is the way that we'll be able to repair the breach among us, between us, around us, and the scars in our own souls. Love is the way that we will be able to be reconciled as a human species to the planet and to the other species around us. So I realize I'm proselytizing and I'm converting, and I'm trying to convince you as a community with me that love is our path and we should believe in it assiduously. I'm looking so forward to a conversation with you now and ongoing as we get to know each other. I'm looking so forward to being with you this summer in the beautiful cathedral at Chartres, and to walk a path of fierce love together that leads us from apology to reparations, to reconciliation, to healing. Thank you.
Thank you, Jackie. That was beautifully presented, and I think they're very profound points that you're making about how in our daily lives we need to embody love in all kinds of different ways. And the question that I would have for you is how the pandemic, with our lockdowns and social distancing and masks, when for 2 years now we've been basically told by the force of law,
right,
regulatory mandates, not to be with each other,
right,
to be in isolation, not to go out and about, not to go to restaurants, etc. How has the experience of the pandemic either changed or deepened your sense of fierce love? Are there certain points that you have found more helpful? Are there things that you've experienced that weren't included? How has love blossomed in your heart through COVID?
I love that question, Jim. Makes me want to say, what's love got to do with it, right? I actually wrote this book during COVID and after a fire that took my sanctuary down to the ground. And so I think the first thing I would
You mean your
say,
church? Your
my
church was
church
burnt to the
burned
ground?
down December 5th, 2020.
Oh my
I had
goodness.
sold the book in 2019 when you all were like July of 2019. And we wrote this book during COVID and then the fire that torched our sanctuary down
Mm,
um, is a character in the book. I would say I'm more convinced than ever that fierce love needs to guide us. It was fierce love that made us shut down our sanctuary before the fire in March. We just shut it down. As soon as we started hearing about COVID, our community was vulnerable. Got a lot of old people, a lot of babies, a lot of toddlers, immunocompromised people. Some churches were saying, we have to stay open. We were like, we are shutting it down and pivoting to a digital way to connect. So many ways to connect in the Zoom spaces. Yes, we got sick of Zoom, but we did it. And 600 new people found their way to our community. I would say, in a way, that COVID made more opportunities, Jim, for people who were isolated to feel connected,
mm.
for people who were differently abled to feel connected. And we'll never go back to just physical now because our friends in Bendigo, Australia, and in Beijing, China, and in the Bowery, let's say, to do the East Village, found a way to. I mean, a woman in Alaska who's friends with a woman in Colorado, who's friends with a man in New York because of the digital spaces. So the lesson for me was we are human, we are inextricably connected, and the digital space proves it to us that we are linked.
Yeah, that's what happened to us too.
Right?
At Ubiquity, we, with the COVID, everything shut down. We created Humanity Rising as a daily Zoom
Right.
broadcast, and just like with you, all of a sudden we were experiencing an abundance that had never occurred to us before.
Exactly.
Just by reorienting the pathway of love out into the world and back. So that's
And so many people get to be a part of your loving community now. So many more people get to be a part of your loving community because they have access through this crazy thing called ones and zeros, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Another just question that was coming up in my mind with your third point about lightening the load.
Ah.
I feel like there may be a little contradiction in our real-time situation because it feels like, after 2 years of the pandemic, I think everyone was thinking, oh, now we can lighten our load and get back to some semblance of normalcy, if you can call it that. And now we've got the invasion of the Ukraine on top of everything else.
Right.
And then in the middle of this, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change is saying the climate is getting worse. So speak to us for a moment about how you activate love in a situation where the external environment is getting heavier and heavier and harder to bear.
Gosh, that's such a good question, John. This morning, my colleague who preached so that I didn't have to pulled this text from the Christian scriptures where there's a woman with a 12-year hemorrhage, right? And in the Jewish old culture, that meant she was unclean, untouchable, isolated like COVID, like no one went near her for 12 years. And she ends up getting well because she touches the hem of Rabbi Jesus's garment. But it isn't really, I think, a story about, the garment made her well. It's her impulse. It's her desire. It's her persistence, right? It's her ingenuity and her creativity. I think this is going to get me well. And so I think this moment right here, Jim, calls for us to lighten our load by spreading out the load, is what I would say. Like, we are human together, you and I. And if we can imagine that we have colleagues across a system, across the world, smart people in government and smart people in science and, faith leaders and teachers and artists, each of us holding on to some piece of a dream that will
Mm.
heal us. Then we don't have to feel it. Don't got to be so heavy. A lyric says in one of my favorite songs, if we pull our own weight, each of us doing a little bit, shine the light, you lead the way, you teach the class, you do the choreography, you write the paper, you find the science, you conserve, you stop using the plastic, like you stop using the paper, like all of the little pieces of the thing that we can hold actually does make the load lighter.
Yeah, and it's worth mentioning, Rabbi Jesus on the cross. The deepest teaching is that there's nothing that we are subjected to, nothing,
Nothing.
but that in the heart of it, you
Right.
can say, Father,
Right.
forgive them, they know not what they
Exactly.
do,
That's
and
right.
embrace them in a spirit of love. So
Preach, my
that's an
brother.
important teaching on a Sunday from a Christian minister.
Right. That's right. And the Christian minister who wants to like be universalist in my saying that, it's love. It's love that took Jesus to Jerusalem to teach this gospel. And it's love that had him say the hard good things. And it was fear that got him killed. But it was love that got him healing and preaching and teaching and opening blind eyes. And so I think that story of cross and death and resurrection for me is that love is stronger than anything. Love refuses to die.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Jackie. Jackie's going to give us a benediction in a moment to just close us out. But I want to just remind everyone of the profundity of not only the teachings that we've received today about fierce love, but the importance for all of us as we navigate through increasingly uncertain times in not only escalating ecological turbulence, but now escalating political and geostrategic turbulence, that Venus rising, love and beauty rising, is still accessible to us wherever we are, whoever we are, whatever we're doing. And it's in that spirit that we want to make pilgrimage to Chartres this year, because at this kind of time, it is the willingness for all of us just simply to come together on our knees before the Black Madonna in a sacred place that can empower us to be good Samaritans, that can empower us to endure whatever it is necessary for us to endure, and to empower us to so radiate love that the darkness is dispelled and people are healed, even if they've been ill low these past 12 years. So Jackie, thank you so much for your teachings today. We look forward to seeing you again before we end up in Chartres together in August. And so please, as a minister of the Middle Collegiate Church, give us a final benediction.
Thank you so much, Jim. Everyone, I ask that love will be your guide, that love will soothe your wounds, that love will open your heart, that love will guide your path, and that by whatever names you call God, the Holy, that you will pull close to that source of love and light so that you may be made well and be a healer for others. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Jackie.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. See
Thank you,
you next month. And hope all of you join us for our pilgrimage to Chartres. It's going to be a powerful time of Venus rising. Bye for now.
Bye. Thank you, everyone.